Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Bubble Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, and I want to just say a few words about the grift that keeps on grifting, the gift that goes on giving, and I'm talking about RussiaGate, because as we've noted many times before, RussiaGate never ends, and that's its rationale. It's the perpetual motion machine, and it's just too good for the Democrats ever to let it go. And it's too good, I think, for our own national security establishment to let it go. So today, there have been yet more developments on Russia and Russian interference in the US election system. Arrests have been issued, indictments have been issued, and all sorts of sites have been banned. So the Justice Department, let me show you this. The Justice Department made this dramatic announcement today. Here's the CNN saying that they're undertaking major action to tackle Russian efforts to influence 2024 election. The amazing thing is that I didn't know there were you needed any more action. I thought that that's pretty much all that they do at the DOJ, which is to to monitor whatever the Russians are doing as for the 2024 election. Anyway, so it says here, this is CNN. These actions represent the Biden administration's most significant public response yet to alleged Russian influence operations targeting American voters. After the US accused Iran of trying to hack both the Trump and Biden-Harris campaigns last month, that's always very interesting when they say the Biden-Harris campaigns. I mean, what do they mean by the Biden-Harris? I mean, do they mean first the Biden and then the Harris campaign? Because there was no Biden-Harris campaign. There was just a Biden campaign because the votes were for Biden. So it's not clear. I mean, both the Biden and separately the Harris campaigns were the victims of Iran. Anyway, Wednesday's expected actions are a reminder that US officials continue to see Russia as a prominent foreign influence threat to November's election. Now, notice how the media continually writing about how Trump will not accept the outcome of the 2024 election. We know he's going to challenge it. We know that he's getting ready to lay waste to the country. He's going to unleash his MAGA hordes because they're not prepared to accept the election results. Well, it sounds to me like it's the Democrats who are preparing the groundwork for not accepting the 2024 election results, hence this obsession about Russia, just as they never accepted the outcome of the 2016 election. And so they're saying, oh, well, the U.S. continue to see Russia as a prominent foreign influence threat to November's election. So, of course, since Russia is a foreign influence threat, then presumably, if the election outcome doesn't go the way you want it to go, then you can say, well, it's illegitimate because it was Russia that interfered with the election. Anyway, it says here, CNN first reported on the pending US actions earlier Wednesday. The Russian disinformation operation is being laundered through both American and non-American voices. US officials also named Social Design Agency, which the Treasury Department has already sanctioned for allegedly running fake news sites in Europe on behalf of the Russian government, and then 3 other sources said. Then he goes on, formerly known as Russia Today, RT runs television and online platforms around the world that advance the Kremlin's agenda. Well, just as most publicly owned radio and television stations do. I mean, that's why they set them up. I mean, they didn't set them up in order to run hostile and critical uh, programs about their governments. I mean, Deutsche Welle will not run programs attacking Sergeant Schultz. And the same France 24 is not going to go around attacking Macron. So it says that the Justice Department forced RT America to register as a foreign agent in 2017 after US intelligence officials concluded that the media outlet contributed to Russian efforts to meddle in the 2016 election. Now, meddling in the 2016 election, it means absolutely nothing and in general, because the moment you open your mouth and the moment you send out a tweet, the moment you say anything, you are meddling in the 2016 election. That's the whole point of an election. We all meddle in it. Anyone who takes part in an election, in the debates that surround an election, is meddling in the election by definition. It's there to be meddled with. So for them to say that they contribute to the Russian efforts to meddle, well, by definition, I mean, if RT, which is owned by the Russian government, was broadcasting in 2016, then you could say, yeah, they were meddling in the election. Well, broadcasting anything is meddling in the election. So it's a meaningless term, but it's done in order to confuse people so that people forget that under the First Amendment in the United States, under the First Amendment, you are allowed to meddle. You are allowed to meddle in an election. You're allowed to speak your mind, whether you're a Russian or a Frenchman or an Israeli or whatever. Everybody can meddle in the US election. We have that creepy guy, John Oliver, who's an Englishman, and he does a show. I think it's on HBO. I never watch it, but he does it in every election. And you could say, well, there's a person, John Oliver, an Englishman. He's meddling in the election. We can't have Englishmen meddling in elections. And let's not forget that the worst, most egregious case of anyone meddling in the 2016 election was, of course, the British through Christopher Steele. You can't meddle more than what Christopher Steele did, who essentially laundered fake, fraudulent, phony intelligence, claiming that he had Kremlin inside sources, alleging all sorts of nonsense about Trump. That had an impact. That had an impact on the election. And since Christopher Steele had been a big shot in MI6, then you could say, yeah, the British government actively interfered, meddled in the US election. Certainly, a hell of a lot more than the Russians did, because no one has actually come up with any evidence beyond RT broadcasts that the Russians meddled in the 2016 election. Wednesday's announcement marked the second major effort by the Biden administration to blunt RT's influence in as many as months. In July, the Justice Department accused an RT employee of being involved in a scheme that used a network of about 1,000 social media accounts to pose as US residents to spread information about the Ukraine war and other topics. 1,000 social media account. There are, I don't know, billions, I think, of social media accounts. If you add together Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all the rest of them, there are billions of social media accounts. 1,000 is just nothing. It's zero. It's less than 0.001% of the social media. So that we found some social media accounts posing as US residents to spread disinformation about the Ukraine war. And then Then it says here that asked to comment, an RT spokesperson did not respond to the substance of the allegation and instead emailed mocking comments, including 2016 called, and it wants its cliches back. But I always love the one did not respond to the substance of the allegation. Well, why the hell should it? I mean, it's so laughable. Anyway, here's the New York Times. US to accuse Russia of using its state media to influence 2024 election. You know, I mean, it's how does it, well, it's Russian state media. What do you, I mean, what do you expect Russian state media to do? I mean, it's not like you're talking about US media. This is Russian state media. So you're accusing Russian of state media of influencing the election in whatever way it can influence the election. How can Russian state media influence the election? But in saying this, the United States just looks completely ridiculous, because essentially the Russians are going to turn around and say, well, what the hell do we care what you say about Russian state media? And how much influence do you exert when it comes to Russian elections? I mean, it's legion how much the US, the EU, and everyone interferes in Russian elections. But these stories in New York Times, they're all start with the premise that this is something we never do. We don't interfere in other elections, even though everybody knows that, of course, you've been doing this for decades. I mean, do we really want to go through all the elections that the United States has been meddling in? American spy agencies have assessed that the Kremlin favors former President Donald Trump, seeing him as skeptical of US support for Ukraine. This has to be the most boring subhead anyone has ever crafted in journalism, because Russians have already said time and time again, we don't support Trump. If anything, we support the Democrats. I said we talked about it the other day when this Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, said, well, we generally support the Democrats. They're more stable, they're more reliable, and so that includes Harris. So they say all this. Putin has several times said we support Biden. But no, the intelligence agencies they support Trump, seeing him as skeptical of US support for Ukraine. Again, forgetting that it was Trump who basically unleashed the lethal aid for Ukraine. It was he who kind of abandoned the Obama policy and started sending lethal aid to Ukraine. But no, it doesn't matter. You can say all these things, and the New York Times, to his, the dying day, will continue to say Russians support Donald Trump because they see Donald Trump as skeptical of US support for Ukraine. No evidence for any of this, but let's just keep saying it, because we've been saying it for years, so we'll just go on saying it. And then it says the United States plans to unveil indictments on Wednesday that accuse Russia of trying to influence the election in November by using its state-run media to push divisive messages and misinformation. Divisive messages. Imagine United States, this cohesive, unified country, where most people basically agree with everyone else. Most people respect everyone else. If it weren't for these Russians pushing these divisive messages. The indictments are part of a larger federal effort to push back on the Kremlin's effort to influence the vote. Again, they just accept this Kremlin's effort to influence the vote. And why does the Kremlin make this effort to influence? Well, because they want to get Trump in. So again, notice how essentially they're laying the groundwork to start screaming that if they don't get what they want, they don't get a Harris presidency, they will immediately It's already there. They're laying the ground, but they will immediately scream, Putin interfered in this election and did it again to secure this election for Trump. The Treasury Department is set to announce a set of sanctions. The State Department is set to announce new actions against Russians involved in election influence efforts. Note again the lack of, a cautionary adjective such as alleged, but no, Russians involved in election influence efforts. The United States has said that Russian intelligence agencies have been using RT, the state-owned broadcaster, to spread disinformation through bots. I mean, it's just amazing that RT has this reach, this power in the United States. Here you've got the networks, you've got all the cable news channels, all of which are rabidly anti-Russian, most of which, incidentally, are anti-Trump. But somehow this one outlet, RT, which is quite difficult to get in the United States, impossible to get in Europe unless you have a VPN. But they're spreading disinformation through bots. US officials have been looking more closely at how the Kremlin and its spy agencies use RT to influence the election. They already did that. They published, as part of that ICA that they published in January 2017, was the ICA Intelligence Community Assessment. They published this dreary report about the 2012 election, about how they allege the Russians allegedly played this huge role in the 2012 election, and they just just reported about all the shows that were on RT in 2012. But again, they're still looking into how the Kremlin uses RT. And then Attorney General Merrick Garland is holding a meeting of the Justice Department's Election Threat Task Force, and is expected to announce the indictments and detail the government's latest efforts to halt the intervention. And then Ray will be there, and Matthew Olson, head of the National Security Division of the Justice Department. It's so nice to see taxpayer dollars put to good use. The United States was caught flat-footed in 2016 as its spy agencies learned about Russian efforts to influence the vote on behalf of Mr. Trump, and were late in warning the public. I mean, again, they just say all this. No evidence is ever presented that the Russians, made an effort to influence the vote on behalf of Mr. Trump. It just simply gets, by dint of repetition, it all gets accepted. And we're late in warning the public. They were warning the public throughout 2016 because they were already concerned about a possible Trump victory, and Hillary Clinton was putting out her bullshit intelligence from Steele, trying to get the media to write essentially do gloss on Steele's ridiculous report. I mean, and that's what they were doing in 2016. They were pushing this on the media, and then of course they were pushing it on the FBI. In subsequent elections, US intelligence officials were more aggressive at calling out Russian, Chinese, and Iranian efforts to influence American elections, but nobody else, not Britain, Israel, or anyone else. And then it goes on, but officials say that fighting election interference has been more difficult this year. Oh, why has it been more difficult? Some Americans, particularly Mr. Trump's supporters, see accusations of that Russia is spreading disinformation as efforts to undermine their views and policy positions. Damn, they can't explain to the public about how Russia is messing up our election because they care so much about the sensitivities of Trump supporters. It's these Trump supporters that they feel we're undermining their positions. We're doing our best. We want to alert the public to the terrible things Russia is doing, but we have to take into consideration Mr. Trump's supporters. So we just can't do anything. Our hands are tied. Officials say that fighting election interference has been more difficult this year. Why is it more difficult this year? Because some Americans, particularly Mr. Trump supporters, see accusations that Russia is spreading disinformation as efforts to undermine their views and policy positions. That's it. That we just can't get through to them because these we have to really respect their wishes, respect their their policy positions. Can you mention anything as nonsensical? You've been peddling nonstop rubbish about Russia since 2016 on a daily basis. And now you're saying, well, we can't do very much now because we have to worry about what Mr. Trump's supporters think. In other words, again, they're laying the groundwork for screaming that Russia stole this election and that we weren't able to do anything about it because we were so concerned about Mr. Trump's supporters. The United States has taken some actions against Russian organizations it believes are trying to influence American politics. In March, the Treasury Department sanctioned a Russian group that had aided efforts to create fake news sites that spread misinformation. Again, no one ever says alleged, just simply said, oh yeah, this is what they were doing. Much of that misinformation campaign, so it's already accepted it's misinformation. In other words, anything you don't like, misinformation, was aimed at derailing military funding for Ukraine as Congress wrestled with a contentious vote this year. So of course, anyone who says, well, I don't think it's a great idea to send $60 billion to Ukraine. It's American taxpayer money. I don't think it's a good idea that more Ukrainians should go on dying or Russians should go on dying. I don't think it's a good idea to use this money to provoke a possible world war with Russia. No, that's just misinformation. It's clearly being spread by the Kremlin. The war in Ukraine has made the US election one of the most pivotal for President Vladimir Putin of Russia, while Ms. Harris is expected to continue the Biden administration's vigorous support for Ukraine. Mr. Trump has pledged to end the war quickly, forcing the parties into negotiation. Oh, the scumbag. I mean, imagine wanting to do that, forcing the parties into negotiations. What a disgusting... for that alone, he should be kicked off the ballot. His vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, has spoken disparagingly about providing funding for Ukraine. So first of all, they were saying earlier about Trump was very skeptical. Now they're saying, oh, he's forcing the parties into negotiation. Imagine forcing the parties. No, we don't want any stinking negotiation. No negotiation. Let's just go on fighting this war. Let's just go on sending more and more American arms and money to Ukraine, and just keep this war going. And imagine this horrible Trump who's saying, and it's questionable really whether Trump intends to do this. Trump will succeed in doing this. All that is very much in the realm of speculation. But this is just an outrage to the New York Times that you're going to force anyone into negotiations. What a terrible thing to do. And here's CBS. US accuses Russia of sprawling election interference campaign. Oh, it's not sprawling. Seizes dozens of fake sites. And then, prosecutors unsealed an indictment in federal district court in New York, charging 2 Russia-based employees of RT, a state-controlled media outlet, of conspiring to commit money laundering and conspiring to violate FARA. Garland said RT and the two employees implemented a $10 million scheme to fund and direct the Tennessee-based company to publish and disseminate information favorable to the Russian government. The content was consistent with Russia's goals to push US divisions and anti-Ukraine content. Now, the thing right away that strikes you here is that this is never going to go to trial. These are two journalists employed by RT who are based in Russia. So this is a complete, absolute, total waste of time and is done for propaganda purposes because this trial is never going to take place. One of the employees is somebody, incidentally, that I know. I mean, I've never met her, but I have corresponded with her. But she's not going to come to the United States. So it's another one of those cases when the Mahler who would bring these big cases forward. Oh, we indicted these Russians. Yeah, but none of them is going to come to trial. So, you know, you're getting a lot of publicity, getting favorable writes-up in the New York Times, but it's never going to see the light of day. I mean, it's just meaningless. $10 million. It doesn't, that's a lot of money. I don't know where did they get the $10 million from? I don't know. I don't think RT has that kind of money to splash around a $10 million scheme to fund and direct a Tennessee-based company to publish and disseminate information favorable to the Russian government. That costs $10 million? I think you could just simply get a few guys and write some op-eds. I don't know how it comes to $10 million. Garland said Putin's, quote, inner circle, unquote, directed Russian public relations companies to promote disinformation and state-sponsored narratives as part of efforts to influence the upcoming presidential election. He said an internal planning document. Ooh, an internal planning document. Imagine that. They've got their hands on an internal planning document created by the Kremlin, stated one of the campaign's goals is, quote, securing Russia's preferred outcome in the election. Isn't that nice? It's nice of them to write it all out, you know, secured, you know, signed Ivan Popov. Garland also announced that the Justice Department seized 32 internet domains that the Russian government and pro-Russian actors used to engage in what he said was a covert campaign to interfere and influence the outcome of our country's elections. The Attorney General said the two schemes made clear the ends to which the Russian government, including at its highest levels, is willing to go to undermine our democratic process. Why is that undermining the democratic process? I mean, even if all of your allegations are true, and I don't believe them for one moment, it's just too pat. But let's say they were all true. How is it undermining the democratic process? I mean, you could, even if they're fake websites, I mean, it's part of the debate. If they're fake, shouldn't be that difficult to point out that they're fake. Most people immediately spot a fake picture, a fake website, a fake tweet. There's never really any problem about that. So, but I don't see how it's in any way undermining a democratic process. This is deadly serious, and we are going to treat it accordingly. And then goes on, among the goals of the campaigns, this is the Russian campaign, are to, quote, reduce international support for Ukraine, bolster pro-Russian policies and interests, and influence voters in the US and foreign elections, while concealing the Russian government and its agents as the source of the content. So that's really good. And you know, again, it sounds exactly what every single government in the world does in every single election taking place elsewhere, particularly the United States. Anyway, so these are the projects. The Justice Department obtained notes, project proposals, planning documents, and other records during its investigation. It's so nice that people leave all sorts of things like that lying around, and so somebody can grab them. Some of which detail objectives, target audiences, and campaign topics. The department redacted the names of the political parties and presidential candidates. But, one of them was Donald J. T. We don't know what the T stands for. Labeling them only U.S. political party A or B, candidate A or B, but the documents include information that makes them identifiable. Huh. Yeah, wonder. I'm really very excited. And then that's that. So, but here it says target audiences. Target audiences include battleground state residents whose votes will impact the outcome of the presidential context, residents of conservative states where traditional values are strong, who more often vote for candidates of unidentified political parties, gamers, Jewish Americans, and Hispanic Americans, according to the filings. Though redacted, the document appears to be referring to the Republican Party. This is the party that apparently is skeptical of Ukraine. So, we don't need to go into details of that. The indictment, I mean, they're all much of a muchness. You've seen many of them before. I've seen many of them before. None of them have any plausibility. It's part of a propaganda campaign. As I say, obviously, they're laying the groundwork for screaming Russia, Putin, should the election result in a Trump victory. Just as if the election results in a Harris victory, then the very same people will say this was absolutely the most perfect, most impeccable, best, most wholesome, truthful election that has ever been held in the history of mankind. So that's it. But happily, none of this will ever go to trial, and so you can just make up all sorts of stuff. Tell us about Putin planned this and Lavrov planned that, and you're not going to have to prove any of that because no one's going to show up for the trial date. However, this is still early September. We're going to hear a lot more RussiaGate nonsense in the months to come. Remember, last week we talked about the raid on Scott Ritter, the raid on Dimitri Simes. There's going to be more raids in the coming month. They're very good for media coverage. CNN loves raids. And then the New York Times loves writing up these raids. So that's the RussiaGate bulletin for today. Thanks very much for joining me. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.